Good evening, everyone. I hope you all have the same handout as we were using in the last couple of weeks. And what we're going to learn today from Wolbe is an absolutely fantastic piece, something really phenomenal and very, very interesting. Just to remind you the topic, we were in the third chapter of Wolbe in his Shah Aleph, in his first section, dealing with Mahu Adam, what it means to be a human being. And Wolbe was discussing the role of Seho, the role of our intelligence, our intellectual faculties within a human being. Before I go further, by the way, I should say, as per usual, if anyone wants to ask any questions, please just feel free to unmute yourselves or post a question on the chat group. So Wolbe is talking about Seho, human intelligence. And we were up to the second page in the new handout. Wolbe basically said that in the minds of human beings, there are two components. There's what he called hakara, which is recognition of the objective. This can be recognition of something simple, like identifying an object, and it can be recognition of something complicated, like a scientific insight, but it's absolute and objective, and that's on the one hand. And on the other hand, there's ha'aracha, which is evaluation, weighing things up. Do I like something? Don't I like something? What does it mean to me? How do I feel about it? And this is what he calls ha'aracha, evaluating. And this is subjective by definition. It's what it means to me. And even though perhaps we think that we spend a lot of our time using our minds in working out the absolute reality of the world, in fact, our first way of thinking is always evaluation, is always haracha. What do I think about this? How do I like this? Do I like this person? Don't I like this person? What do I think about this? What do I feel about this? Do I enjoy this? Don't I enjoy this? And this is the first thing we do. It's the first thing biologically we do, chronologically we do, as we grow up. The first thing a child does, even before they begin using the faculty of objective truth, is what does this feel like to me? And the second stage is we then begin thinking about objective truth. And this is also in our day-to-day life. It's not just in as we grow up and age chronologically, but also day-to-day. Our first instinctive way of looking at the world is very often subjective. How do I feel about this? And only later do we think about objectively, what is this? Now, there's nothing wrong with these two elements. They're both absolutely fine, but we need to realize and we need to understand and identify which one are we doing. Both hakara, absolute recognition, and ha'aracha, evaluation, are appropriate and correct. They are both two parts of what it means to be a human being and to think, to use our marechet, our seichel, our intelligence. It's not that one or the other is low quality. They're both important. Nonetheless, we have to identify which one is it. If something happens and I'm feeling hurt by something someone's done, I need to ask myself and I need to think, is this my feeling? Is this my subjective evaluation, ha'aracha, of the situation? Or is this hakara? Is this an absolute objective assessment? Is it that this is how the person made me feel because of a subtlety of their body language or experiences I've gone through in my life, my reading of the situation? Or is this in an absolute sense what really is, what in reality really is the situation? And I need to ask myself that question in order to ensure that I'm using the correct aspect of myself to identify it correctly. So they're both important. We use evaluation, subjective evaluation. We use hakara, absolute objective recognition. We need to do both, but we need to recognize which one is which. Now, right at the end of what we looked at the last time we learned, which last week was Shavuos, so this is 2 weeks ago, was Wolbe saying this is what's unique about human beings. Malachim, angels, are much better than us in hakara, in absolute recognition. They have a clarity of vision which is uncorroded and uncorrupted. In the language of the Rambam, they are secholim nivdolim. They are detached or separated intelligences. They're not affected by our bodily experiences. They're computers. Their computing power doesn't need to work through flesh and blood. And we already discussed, and Wolbe already told us, that there can be several reasons why our system, our maracha of hakara, of absolute objective recognition, doesn't work. It could be because there's a bias and something distorting our recognition of the truth. That's possible. But it could simply be that our seichel, our minds, aren't up to the challenge. Maybe this is a very subtle and complicated problem, maybe something in science or something very difficult in emotional intelligence, whatever it may be. And maybe this is simply too difficult for our intelligence. Or maybe it simply takes us time to work it through. So in terms of Seichel, absolute hakara, recognition, objective, we human beings have certain abilities, but we're also very fallible. We're not infinitely able to always understand the situation. In that respect, Malachim, the angels, are far better than us. But what makes a human being unique is our ha'aracha, our ability to evaluate, to weigh up. That's what makes us complicated, because we see things in shades and nuance, and there's pros and cons, and there's pluses and minuses, and there's fors and against, and on some level I like this, and another level I don't. And that's what makes us unique and complicated and endlessly fascinating. And this is also what creates us as the beings who therefore can assess and evaluate and come hopefully to conclusions about what it is that we choose to value in our lives. In recognition of absolute truth, it's like a computer. It's all or nothing, it's mathematical. In evaluation, in haracha, in the subjective, we now need to make a choice. What are the values in our life? What do we find important? What matters to us? And it's there that our true spirituality, our true contribution can be made. In the world of the absolute, we've got nothing to contribute. The world of the absolute is created by God. It's there. It doesn't need us. It's indifferent to our existence. Whether we're born, whether we die, whether we even ever were, no difference. What do humans bring to the scene? Where does our existence collectively and as individuals make a difference? In our ability to evaluate, because that's the space that we own. We don't own an objective universe out there. Whether we understand the rules of science, whether we don't, it keeps going. It operates on its own. There's one part of the universe, one part of space that we have ownership of, and that's our subjective, our sense of self, that which we value, how we evaluate life, and that's where our responsibility as humans come in. And therefore, even though both halves of the Seichel, both aspects of our intelligences that Wolbe identified and that we discussed in previous weeks, the objective hakara and the subjective ha'aracha evaluation are important, what makes us unique as human beings are because we can weigh up. And of course, ultimately, hopefully our evaluations, that which we value, will be in line with that which really ought to be valuable. And we will make decisions in life, and we'll be willing to sacrifice and give up things of real value, things that matter to us in the interest of a bigger and more worthy value. There's no difficulty in choosing that which is right when we don't value that which we're giving up. But in life, very often we have to give up. And it's not always as simple as wrong and right, good and bad. It's not that we have to sacrifice the bad for the good. Sometimes we have to sacrifice the good for the greater good, the things that really matter to us, things that are important to us. There's nothing wrong with positive experiences in life. We daven for Chaim Shalosh V'Kovod, having wealth and respect and honor and dignity are important things. But we need to be able to sometimes, when necessary, when called upon, give that up for a value that is yet more important. And this therefore leads us to the next paragraph of Wolbe. So we're here on page Lamed in the handout sheets. If you don't have the handout sheets, then they are available on the website in the Lehava share page. And I apologize, I will be doing some reading because I was asked to keep this textual. And in the second paragraph, in the paragraph beginning, B'shah shebikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Wolbe speaks about this, and he brings a medrash. And the medrash says, B'shah shebikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu livrot et ha'olam ve'et ha'adam, at the time when Hashem requested when Hashem wanted to create the world and to create humanity, the angels are saying, who are human beings that they should be remembered? Now, this is a common theme in Medrash. Over Shavuos, undoubtedly, you heard much discussion around the Medrash. When Moshe came up to Shemayim, the Malachim criticized and said, who is he to get the Torah? When Hashem created the world, the Malachim questioned, who are human beings to be created? This is a common theme in the Medrash. The Medrash uses the Malachim as a prop almost, as a contrasting vision of what human beings could be, what intelligence could be like. And what the Medrash is grappling with is, why are we human beings the way we are? Why aren't we all Malachim? Why should it be that God creates us with such clouded vision? Why can't we have perfect intelligence, perfect clarity of purpose like the angels have? And therefore they put in the mouths of the angels this claim, who is a human being that you should remember? Why are humans important to you, O God? Says the Medrash, what do you want from a human being? The Soif God's reply to them is, the Medrash goes to a whole series, and the final response of God to the Malachim to explain the purpose of human existence is a side halacha amongst the 613 commandments. And this is the idea that we discussed in the previous weeks, that a person can make a neder, a promise. And the promise can be, dedicate to God the value of another human being. And then we need to assess the value This is a topic called Erechin, assessing the value of another person. And one will give that money as a donation to Hektish, as a donation to the temple, to the Beit HaMidrash. Evaluating something. How much is someone worth to me? And we saw from Wolbe that this is inherently a subjective rather than an objective experience. And Hashem turns to the angels and says, you know what is unique about human beings? That they have this mitzvah of Erechin, of assessing the value of something or someone and dedicating that to holiness. This is a remarkable idea. What's so special about this mitzvah? There's 612 other mitzvahs that seem far more important, and yet this particular mitzvah, the idea of taking a vow in which I dedicate to God the value of something, that, says Hashem, is what's uniquely human, and that is what makes man worthy of existence, rather than just being angelic beings. This is a fascinating idea that Wolbe says. This is what's unique about humans. Let's read this inside in Wolbe. The final response of God to the angels was, this is on page Lamed, the second page of the source sheet, the second paragraph. Do you angels have the quality of being able to assess the value of others? There's a pasuk in the Torah that talks about donating a promise, a gift to God, per the value of someone. Who upon high can be compared in value to God? In other words, the world stands on our ability as human beings to subjectively evaluate a situation. In other words, this world is the world of values. If we want to know absolute objective truth, go to heaven. Deal with angels. What makes this world unique is that it's values. And once you're in a world of values, there's never an absolute. There's never a right and a wrong. Everything has a value. Everything has a price. Everything has some importance. The question is, which one do we choose between these competing importances? Each person chooses what is the highest value in their life. For example, the objective mind assesses that in a used stamp there's no value at all. There is a person who values used stamps and makes a collection of used stamps, and they make this the supreme value in their lives. Maybe someone dedicates their whole life to stamp collecting of used stamps. And they're willing to pay a great fortune, a great treasure, for one more rare used stamp. The ability of human beings to evaluate, to ascribe value, can create something from nothing. So when we ask ourselves, how can we human beings be godlike? If our responsibility is to be holy, is to be similar to Hashem, if Hashem's unique ability is to create yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, how can we humans create something from nothing? In the world of the objective, never. Because even if we make something new, it's always something from something. But in the world of evaluations, we can literally make something from nothing. We can take a stamp which is used and worthless and ascribe value to it. Where did it get the value from? Because subjectively it matters to me. And in the world of evaluations, Wolbe is using this as a thought experiment, or mashal, not to talk about stamp collecting, but to explain that in the world of values, in the world of the subjective, that's where we can create something from nothing. So we've dealt with many times in this series of Lehava Shiurim about what a purpose is created for. And once we spoke about it from the aspect of free will. We learned Wolbe's Rabbi Dessler's Kuntrus Abachira. Another time we spoke about it in terms of chesed and giving. Dessler's Kuntrus HaChesed. Here Wolbe is arguing what makes a person unique. The highest aspiration a person can have to become similar to God, to literally create something from nothing, is because of our ability, dafka, deliberately, because we are subjective beings, and therefore we choose what we value in life, and it's there that the crux of human spirituality, human independence, human significance, moral decisions that matter, decisions of potential holiness that can make a difference to ourselves and the world, and give meaning to our lives, that's what it stems from, because we need to make the choice what we value in life. And therefore, this really leads to an exercise that Wolbe is interested in talking about. I set a little bit of homework last time we met, last time we had the share. I said that every time we have a thought, one can't do this the whole day, but 5 minutes a day, just give a little bit of thought and ask oneself, is this thought I'm having objective or subjective? Is it about absolute hakara, or is it about what I value, ha'aracha? It's important to do in relationships, in interactions with others, in our own relationship to ourselves, in our spiritual lives. When I'm feeling something, I need to ask myself, is this feeling I've got deriving from an objective thought or a subjective thought? A very, very powerful exercise, which the Bali Musa tell us we need to do, those who are interested in ethical development. And Wolbe argues that if we do it, we will notice that much of our time, 60, 70, 80% of our time, the thought we're engaged in is haracha, subjective, not objective. Here, the Wolbe sets us a second exercise. Once we recognize that truth, we need to ask ourselves, what are our values? What are the things that really matter to us? And of course, very quickly you can answer that question. Say, well, of course, what matters to me is I'm very frum. What matters to me is Yiras Shamayim and Torah and mitzvahs and fear of God. That may be what we tell ourselves matters to us. But then we need to ask ourselves what really matters to us. Now that I've done these exercises of 5 minutes a day of thinking, which sort of thought is this? I now need to think, okay, what is it that I'm valuing? What is the thought, the subjective thought of haracha, of evaluation that's taking place? What are the values that I'm putting at the priority in my life? When I meet someone new I've never met before, and I immediately form an evaluation of them based on just a feel and instinct, no objective truth at all, what are the criteria that I'm using? When I face a decision, when I need to make a choice, what are the criteria I'm using to make a decision? What would be the first thing I rescued in the case of an emergency? These are the questions of evaluation of haracha which make us uniquely human, not, as we may think, our absolute objective Seho. And that maybe computers, maybe angels can outperform us, but in the haracha, in the evaluation. And he then finishes very beautifully off with a translation of a line that we say in our tefillah every single week, once a week. The final line of the middle paragraph on page Lamed. We say in tefillah Shachris Shabbos, right, we sing this in tefillah Shachris and Shabbos in the brachas of Kriya Shema. There's no thing which has value like you, Hashem, in this world. Listen to the text of the tefillah. In the world to come, we will recognize Ein Zoloscha. There's nothing but you. In the world to come, we have a clarity of vision. We recognize that only that which is spiritual, only that which is godly, only that which is moral, only that which has intrinsic spiritual values to it, only that has worth, only that exists. But in Olam Hazeh, in this world, in Ke'erikacha, the most we can say is nothing has value like that. There's many things of value, many things that exist in this world, but what we want to aspire to recognize is none of them are as valuable as things that really matter. As connections, as chesed, as acts of kindness, as acts of good deeds, as acts of mitzvahs, of connecting to spirituality, as kedusha. These are the things of erech, value. In the world to come, we'll have a greater clarity. There we'll recognize an objective truth that in Zoloscha there's nothing else that exists. In this world, the most we can recognize is that this is what matters the most. And then in that little poetical line that we say in Tefillah Shabbos, such beauty and such depth is expressed. In this world, it's all about evaluations. We need to recognize nothing is valuable as our relationship to Hashem, our relationship to spirituality and meaning. In the world to come, in the world to come, we'll recognize there's nothing other than that which is spiritual. The fundamental, most essential power, ability, choice that we make with our bechira in life is that which we choose to value. Okay, so this brings us an end to the first part of what Wolbe wanted to say. The concepts, the difference between one component of our intelligence, which is the absolute, the other component of our intelligence is the evaluation, the mismatch between the two, because one is subjective, one is objective, recognizing that what's unique about our human being, us as human beings, is that which is subjective, but then needing to ensure that the subjective is knocked into shape, needing to ensure that that which we value is that which really deserves to be valued. The next section of Wolbe that we're going to look at for the second half of today and next week is going to talk about the importance of Seichel, of absolute objective intelligence in life. And Wolbe is going to argue that this is absolutely fundamental to our spiritual journey. He's going to argue, and this is perhaps a very Litvish argument, that we often think that holiness lies in actions, and it does. Actions are important. We maybe think it lies in emotions, moments of inspiration, that fantastic Kabbalah Shabbos that comes it when we're singing and we're feeling really connected to Hashem. And of course, that's also true. But our single biggest resource to really connect with spirituality is in our minds, in our reason, in our clarity of thought. This is going to be a fascinating argument that Wolbe is going to take us on, in which he argues that this is the bridge. If we ask ourselves, what's the bridge that I can build to connect myself ultimately to God? The answer is the human mind, the great gift of reason and Seho that we've been given. And this is going to be the second half of what Wolbe says. But before I go further, I'm just going to pause for a minute. If there's anyone who wants to ask on anything we've said so far in the conclusion of this section of Wolbe, please do so now. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next section, where Wolbe discusses the absolutely vital place of human reason and intelligence in our relationship to Hashem. Okay, so we will go on. And I now want to draw your attention to the second half of page Lamed in the handout sheets, here in the third chapter of Wolbe in the second volume of Alei Shur. And what Wolbe is going to argue, he's going to give a quote from the Rambam, Maimonides, the Rambam, in his Morin Avuchim, in his Guide to the Perplexed. He's also going to give a quote from Chovas Halavavos, Rabbeinu Bechai, and both of them are going to say that the bridge, the utensil, the implement, the tool that we have fundamentally to connect to Hashem is our ability as human beings to reason and to think. And we're then going to see how in the next section he carries that on, and he says that this is something that's absolutely essential to human spirituality. And this section of Wolbe is really important. I'll speak from the heart now just for a moment. We are aware that there are many different approaches to Yiddishkeit, and each approach has a value, absolutely an important value. However, it is a fact that as of the year 2020, in our current times and generations, there's a form of spirituality that's lost, or being lost, and that's very scary. We know very much about Hasidic ways of spirituality, about this emotional connection to Hashem, and it's vital, it's important, it's a good thing. We even know about Musa, which speaks about working on our midas and working on our character traits. But what we don't talk enough about is the spirituality inherent in the mind, in intelligence and reason. And certainly, as I said, in the Litvish world, in the Lithuanian tradition, this was a very important component of spirituality. In fact, this is a spirituality that's unique to Yiddishkeit. And tragically, it's a spirituality that's been lost. This Lithuanian Litvish Mahalach, the pathway taught particularly by the students of the Vilna Gaon and others, in which the centrality of developing our thinking processes is stressed as a spiritual tool, as a type of ruchnius, as a type of development of what it means to be a human being, is a little bit neglected. It's something we struggle to understand. And Rav Wolbe here is going to hold our hands as he walks us through one way of thinking about what the role of intelligence is in a human being, and how this is a profoundly spiritual tool. We sometimes think of intelligence as, intelligence is what helps us think, helps us navigate, helps us do things. Maybe it's important for emunah and belief in Hashem, but then we now need to get on, and it's about emotions, it's about feelings, and that's true. There's no doubt that these things matter. But Wolbe's also going to argue how we work with our intelligence and how we use it has a spiritual component to it. And I already said, and I want to stress this again, this is a form of spirituality unique to Yiddishkeit, unique to Judaism, to the best of my knowledge. That we argue that by sitting down and learning and engaging in thought and Talmud Torah, that itself is a spiritual experience, as a way of connecting with Hashem. That's a remarkable idea. Many faiths have the idea of other forms of spirituality, of actions and deeds and emotion and such like, but the idea that reason and engaging in thinking is itself of a spiritual quality, that's something very special. I may have mentioned before, and I'll just repeat it again. What's unique perhaps about our world is I saw this in a comment made by a sociologist, actually pointed out that the only society of which they're aware, in which there's ongoing mass adult education, is in Yiddishkeit, is in Judaism. This was a footnote in a book I happen to be reading. We know there are many societies in which they value education for children. There are many societies in which adults who are the elite, who are there in academic institutions, carry on learning through life. But mass lifelong learning for adults, in which it's just seen as part of daily life, to attend classes, to attend lectures, to attend shiurim, to attend drashas. He said, to the best of his knowledge, the only society that exists like that ever in the history of humankind is Orthodox Judaism. Very remarkable, very interesting insight that this historian or sociologist said. And we see this as something of intrinsic spiritual value, just attending a shiur, attending class, and this is what Wolbe is now going to speak about the role of Seho. And he quotes from the Rambam, as I said, and the Chovas Halavavos, that the gift that Hashem gave us that allows us to connect to that which is spiritual is our minds. And let's just read this inside, and then he's going to elaborate and develop it further. Omanu le'el, we said already above, says Wolbe, this is halfway down page Lamed, if our minds are straight and pure, that means not sullied with bias and working properly, it can arrive at a certain recognition of truth, objective. Yashar, straight, without twistingness to it. Tahar, pure, without bias. Shekol kazer, in intelligentsia grader. Seho kazer, such intelligence, in intelligentsia grader is not just intelligence, sort of academic ability, but it's something that contains spiritual power within it. Let's see what the Rishonim say about the ability of human beings to reason. And first of all, he starts quoting the Rambam in his Guide to the Perplexed. I've explained to you, says the Rambam, the great thinker, this seichel, this aspect of human reason that we have, that's been spilled over to us, granted to us from God Himself, who are dibuk Hashem b'neinu v'einu. This is the connection between us and Him, between us and Hashem. If we ask, how can we cleave to God? How can we glue ourselves to Him? How can we connect ourselves to Him? The answer is through seichel, through the ability of human beings to read, to reason. And if you want, permission is granted to all human beings to strengthen this connection, each according to their ability. The one can do so. And if we wish to weaken our ability to reason until it ceases completely, we can also do so. We can make ourselves into animals. We can make ourselves into unreasoning beings. We can be lazy and not bother to exercise our faculties of intelligence, of reason, of seichel, and we can destroy them. We can detach ourselves from Hashem. But if you want to know, says the Rambam, how to connect to Hashem, it's through our seichel, through our ability to reason. A staggering and amazing claim, which we're going to have to understand shortly. He then quotes from the Chovas Halavavos. This is Rabbi Bechai, a very different thinker to the Rambam, who wrote a very classic Mussar work, the Chovas Halavavos. The meaning of the word Chovat Halavavot is duties, obligations of the heart. And Chovas Halavavos said a lot of Yiddishkeit, a lot of Torah talks about obligations and actions, but I haven't seen a work which deals with the Shulchan Aruch, the set of laws of levavot, of our minds and our hearts and our emotions. He spends a lot of time talking about what we need to do. Open the Shulchan Aruch, you learn how to keep Shabbos, how to keep Pesach, what one can do in davening, what one can't do. What's about the laws of levavos? Therefore, Rabbi Bechai set out upon himself the mission of collecting and collating everything that the sages and Chazal and the Torah speaks about Chovas Halavavos. And in one of his sections, he has different gates, different sections in his work. One of them are called Shar Avodas Elokim, the gate of service of God. And there in chapter 5, and here Wolbe quotes it, he says as follows: V'nema, he says, I'm going to say, Ki ha'ora hasichlis hu haskaras Elokim es Adam. The urge of the intellect is the way through which Hashem reminds a human being, be'emsoi sichlo, through the medium of their intellect, Lodas also to know Him, or lahakis simonei chachmaso, to understand, aware of the signs of Hashem's wisdom. This is from Hashem, who gives this call, someone who makes Torah as the light for their steps, as the guiding light for the things they do in life. When a person arrives at their intellectual abilities, maturity, or bira and the clarity of perception, then they will long to understand that which Hashem wants, to ascend the spiritual heights of Hasidim, of pious people, and they will turn their minds away from worldly cares and anxieties and stresses. So here he's saying that the tool that Hashem gave us to awaken within ourselves the longing to connect to Him is our intellect, is our mind. So both schools of thought are identifying our minds as the tool for our connection with Hashem. In fact, this has a link to this week's Sedra. I'm not going to go through the whole of Birchas Koyanim in the Lehava booklet that's put together, I think, I hope it's coming out for this week, for Parshas Nosoi. I wrote about Birchas Koyanim, the triple bracha that's mentioned in this week's Sedra in Parshas Nosoi, and which the Koyanim used to give every day in the Beit HaMidrash. Now we do it on Yom Tovim, that parents still bless their children. The second of the three brachas there is Yoeh Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. Hashem should light up His face to us and grant us favor. Now, what does this bracha mean? Yar Hashem panav elecha means he should grant us, as Rashi, the light of Torah. We use light as a metaphor for wisdom, for Torah. Why? Because light, first of all, is the most abstract of all material things. Light is part of the physical world. It's not spiritual. It's controlled by the laws of science. But it's the best moshel, the best parable, the best allegory we have, the best metaphor we have for that which is spiritual. It's the least tangible, the least material of everything that exists in the world, number one. But number two, it's light. It provides clarity of reason, clarity of thought. We can see, as opposed to fumbling around in the darkness. And therefore, we ask Hashem that Yoai Panov, he should light up his face towards us, he should grant us that clarity of wisdom. And then we say Vichuneka, that we davened that the blessing is that we should find favor. Hashem should grant us favor. What does that mean that he should grant us favor? The root of the word chein, favor. If I say I want to find favor in someone's eyes, it's linked to the Hebrew word chinam, free, grace, that which is granted to us freely. When I ask to find favor in someone's eyes, what I'm saying is I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. I'm asking for something free. Someone who earns something, who does good work, I'm pleased with them because they did good work. If I ask for chein, favor, I'm asking for charisma and grace which hasn't been earned, which is chinam. Always the light of reason in the first case, our ability to think, the gift of Torah is undeserved. Because we don't have that clarity to get us there. Once we have the clarity, whether we live up to it or not, that's where we need to earn our way. But the initial gift of human reason, our ability to reason, to think, to obtain clarity, that's always a gift granted to us in an undeserved way. And that we have to use well. That we have to make sure we now earn it and live up to the expectations of that clarity. So what is it that's the first light? If I ask all of us, when does Hashem first touch us in our lives? Where do we first meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When is the first awakening, stirrings of awakening in a human being that can walk through life in a complete darkness of ego and selfishness and materialism and lack of values and lack of meaning? What's the first knock on the door of the human being, the psyche, that wakes us up to awareness of spirituality, of Ruchnius? The answer is our Seho, our minds. This is the first part of us that wakens up. It's a bit like, when someone is sleeping, if they were completely with no consciousness, no awareness whatsoever, they wouldn't ever be able to wake up from the sleep. It's only because a part of them is functioning that they can wake up from sleep. What wakes us up from sleep? Well, if we've slept enough, the body wakes us up. How does it know to wake us up? Because it's monitoring how much we slept, it's monitoring the various chemical and hormonal and other changes that take place in the body when we sleep, till they hit a certain threshold, and then it says we've had enough sleep, we can wake up. So it's because there's a part of us that's awake and still monitoring the system that we can wake up. Or perhaps we get woken up because there's a noise, or someone shakes us. But that must mean that there's something monitoring sound, and it wakes us up if the sound reaches a certain threshold. Or it's monitoring sensation and feeling, and if we get shaken, it wakes us up if there's a certain sensation of feeling. So there has to be part of us awake to awaken the rest of us. Shlomo Melech says, "Ani yeshena v'libi." I can be sleeping, but my heart has to still be awake. Something of us has to be awake. If we'd be completely asleep, we wouldn't be able to wake up. So what is it in a human being that's still awake, that allows us as ultimately physical beings, to first touch spirituality, to first be awoken to spirituality? As little beings, when we're first born and we're savages, little babies are like savages. We have no self-control, no discipline, no insight, no awareness. It's the dawning, the awakening of our awareness, our Seho, which first allows us to slowly become aware of a world outside ourselves, a world of values, a world of meaning, a world of haracha, and ultimately a world of hakara, of recognition of Hashem. So the first implement we have to touch spirituality always has to start with Seho. We can't deal with Musa and Avodah and Midas and emotions until we first got to Seho, until we first got at least some clarity of thought. And this is therefore the interface between us and Hashem in the language of the Rambam. The medium, that which allows the contact between us and Hashem, is the human reason, the ability of humans to have intelligence. So this is the next point that Wolbe makes. And he imbues this point with a spiritual quality. And he says now in the closing words of page Lamed, and the top of page Lamed Aleph, Seichel is the place where we have siyata d'shmaya, heavenly assistance. This is a remarkable thing. You ask people, how is life going? How are you doing? What are your plans for the future? And they'll say, b'siyata d'shmaya, be'ezras Hashem, with the help of God. B'siyata d'shmaya, with the help of heaven, I should be successful. And now I ask you, where do you find siyata d'shmaya? Where do we see siyata d'shmaya? Where do we see ezras Hashem? When I say I want to succeed, be'ezras Hashem, where do I see that help of heaven? The answer is He's given us that help. He's given us minds. He's given us the ability to reason. Why are we looking for outside sources of help when he's granted us the great undeserved gift? Yoy Hashem Panof, he's given us light of intelligence, of reason, Vichoneko, which is by definition undeserved. It's granted to us freely through no merit of our own. Where do we see that Siyata Shema? The primary place to see Siyata Shema is in our minds, in our ability to reason. So if I say Siyata Shema, what I'm saying is, I will exercise to the fullest, to the best of my ability, the reason, the gift of intelligence, which Hashem has given us in order to succeed. It's in Seichel, it's in mind that help can be found. You know, there's a famous story about a person who's in a flood, and the waters are rising, and he's climbing higher and higher until eventually he's on his roof, and the waters are slowly rising, and a boat, a little boat passes by, and they say, jump into the boat and we'll rescue him. He says, no, thank you, I'm fine. And a few minutes later, a helicopter comes down and lowers a ladder and says, climb up the ladder and we'll rescue you. He says, no, I'm fine. And a few minutes later, another rescue comes by and I'm fine. And they turn to him and they say, what's he waiting? And he turns to God and he says, Hashem, I have trust in you. I want you to help me. And the voice responds from heaven and says, I did help you. I sent you the boat. I sent you the helicopter. I sent you the rescuer. But you chose not to take it. So when we talk about Ezras Hashem, the Siyata Shemaya, what does Hashem send to us? Where is that boat? Where is that helicopter that he sends to rescue us? The answer is, as Wolbe says, the first place to look is in our Seho, in our minds, in the gift of human reason. It wakes us up to the possibility of doing good deeds. And it warns us from deeds that we were not meant to do. And it's the consciousness that knocks on us, knocks at the door, and reminds us, makes us feel guilty, that beats within us, to tell us about mistakes that we've already done, about things that we've already broken, things that we've already ruined. Now you may say, well, surely the seichel of a person can only take one so far. Surely the conscience can sometimes be mistaken. And the answer is, of course it can. But what first drives us to the search to look to Torah for answers, to look to help, to chachamim, to look for growth and spirituality? It has to start somewhere. What is it that makes us even aware that Torah is something that deserves looking up? That's something that wakens us up to make us realize that this is something important and that should matter to us. And that can only be found in the seichel, in the reason of a human being. Hurry, the last line of the page. Even in business, his heroes on our Torah. The Torah warns us. There's a charta. This is a pasuk in Eikev, in Parshas Eikev, in which the pasuk tells us, when you become wealthy and you succeed, there's a charta on the top of the next page. It is God who gives us the koyach, the ability to make and produce wealth, to allow the economy to flourish. What's this koyach, this ability that Hashem grants us to let wealth flourish? Where does he create wealth? The Targum Uncle says on this, for Titka, you should remember Yas Hashem Lekecha, Arihidu Yov Lecha Eitza, the Mikli Nechosim. So Hashem gives us the Eitza, the wisdom, the insight to accumulate wealth. So if we ask ourselves, where does Hashem give us the koyach that the Pasuk tells us about, when we should appreciate, and no one should ascribe their success to their own abilities, to their own arrogance, to their own hubris, to their own power, their own confidence. They should say it comes from Hashem. And where does Hashem give them that wealth? How does he grant it to them? Through their reason, through their minds. They haven't deserved their minds. It's been granted to them as a gift. And this is something which is the way to which Hashem grants us. Makam ha-dveikus ba'adam, the place of dveikut, of cleaving, of clinging to Hashem, is the straight and pure seichel that we have. So we speak a lot about dveikus. I want to have dveikus. I want to attach myself to Hashem. What does dveikus look like? What does it mean to attach ourselves to Hashem? We may think it's in emotion. The Hasidim speak a lot about emotion as being the place of dveikus. Over here, Wolbe is telling us that there's an alternative way of looking at it. The alternative way of looking at it is that we can attach ourselves to Hashem as through our seichel. Now, someone's just posted to me a question here on the chat. Are we defining seichel as Torah? Is that how we access the siyata d'shmaya? And the answer is no. Seichel precedes Torah. Torah is a tool, a resource that we can use to direct and formulate and mold our seichel into a certain method. But before that, we need seichel. A fool can't learn Torah. One has to have seichel. One has to realize that this is something important. We have to use our reason to connect to it. One of the journeys that seichel should take us upon is to learn Torah. But it will take us to other journeys also. We saw already, seichel is what gives us the ability to flourish in business. Seichel is what gives us the ability to have a conscience that wakens us up to mistakes that we've made. Human reason is what tells us about that which we should do and that which we shouldn't do. Hopefully, part of that, the place that the reason will send us to, is to seeking out Torah. But here we're talking about that which even precedes Torah. It's the light of human reason, which is the first thing that wakens us up to seek out a connection with Hashem. So next week we're going to start the next paragraph in which he takes us much further, and I appreciate in a sense I'm leaving this a little bit hanging. But for this week, there's a couple of exercises that Wolbe imposes on us. One is from the first half of the shir. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about identifying when I think things. Is this objective or subjective? Noticing, is this the world of values and subjective, or is this the world of recognition and absolute objective? Wolbe then calls upon us to begin thinking, what is it that we value? That's exercise number 1. So when we find ourselves using our subjective mode, what is it that we value? And the second exercise that Wolbe here sets us to do is to think about our objective reason, and when is our objective reason speaking to us? Hear that voice of the objective reason. Don't ignore it, because that is how Hashem communicates to you. If you ask ourselves, where does Hashem speak to us when we don't have Nevi'im, we don't have prophets? How does he assist us? The answer is sometimes by waking up our Seho, our ability to reason, but then we need to listen to it. So the next exercise is notice what your Seho is telling you and see whether you're listening to it or not. I was also asked here a question, what about if Hashem takes away the Seichel? And we know that can happen in dementia and other mental health challenges and the like. And this is a very difficult and painful question. Dementia is a case of physical illness. It's literally a breakdown of the body, and it's part of a general question about illness, when an illness affects a person and their inability to function. When it comes, though, to mental health, it's a little different. And especially nowadays, where, thank God, we live in a world in which help and support is accessible, even in a situation of a breakdown of mental health, we still remain a human being who has faculty to think and to reason. We're struggling with it, and we need to use that faculty to think and to reason to help us fight and, please God, emerge from it. And Baruch Hashem, we live in a time in which there's therapeutic support and psychotherapeutic support and various other tools that can help us. In the past, let's be honest, it wasn't something that was always understood. People used to talk about, I'm a sugar, someone who's crazy, as if there was something fundamentally different about this person. We now know this absolutely isn't true. A person who's struggling with mental health is a phenomenal human being with enormous gifts of reason, who's struggling with something and dealing with it, and we need therefore to use the gifts and resources available to ourselves to help us do our best to confront it and deal with it. It doesn't mean that we'll be able to deal with it completely, but it doesn't mean either that we are completely helpless and have no ability to reason whatsoever within ourselves. We still remain with that gift to reason. So this is an important question. Thank you for giving me the chance to clarify it. And by the way, whatever model we take of spirituality, it's possible that people find themselves in situations in which they can't exercise it. If spirituality is about actions, sometimes people are unable to do acts. If spirituality is about emotions, sometimes people are unable to feel emotions. However, one of the primary tools of spirituality is Seichel, and it's not one that's spoken about enough. And Wolbe here argues, based on the Rishonim really, that this is a primary way of connecting to Hashem. Please God, next week we will see in more detail how so. So unless there are any other questions, I'll stop here. And please God, we'll resume next week. Siyata d'Shmaya, Bezras Hashem. Hashem should give us the Seichel to be able to resume next week. And I wish everyone a good evening. Thank you very much.